Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this latest installment of this year's Seminars in Christian Worship, Music and Human Community from the Institute of Sacred Music at St. Stephen's House in Oxford, brought to you in part by the Royal School of Church Music. This evening's seminar is given by Dr. Katy Cooper, who is a conductor, arranger, composer, and singer based in Glasgow. She's director of chapel music at the university there and also directs a number of choirs. She's also an academic musician who completed a doctoral thesis on 17th century Scottish vocal music. But her work is very much in context of chapel music and chaplaincy and community in the University of Glasgow. And it's on that subject that she's going to address us initially in the form of a recording this evening. Dr. Cooper will appear and take questions towards the end of this evening's session. So without further ado, we welcome Dr. Katy Cooper to give her paper to the seminar.
Good evening, everybody. It's a real pleasure to be here. My name is Katy Cooper. I am Director of Chapel Music at the University of Glasgow, and I am going to talk to you about chaplaincy here at the university, its context here in Glasgow, and how we try to really engender and community building in the work that we do. Can I apologise first of all that I've pre-recorded this lecture? That's because as we speak, I'm finishing off our event in the chapel with the chapel choir. That's our regular Tuesday evening event, and I just wasn't sure I would be able to 100% guarantee being here at the start. So I am pre-recording this lecture, but I almost certainly am on the call already, and I'll be here at the end to answer any questions that you might have. So first of all, a little bit of context to the university here at Glasgow. As you might know, Scotland has 4 ancient universities and Glasgow is one of them. It's actually the 2nd oldest university and the 4th oldest university in the UK. It was founded in 1451 by a papal bull, and so it has an ecclesiastical foundation, but it's now a secular university. It's in the World Top 100 Universities, and it's a member of the prestigious Russell Group of leading UK research universities. It's a big university. We have around 43,000 students from more than 140 countries. Most of those are studying here, but we also have programs overseas, and we have around 8,000 members of staff at various campuses, including overseas, as well as here in Glasgow and also at our campus in Dumfries. Because this is a pre-recorded video, I can give you a little overview of our campus here, which is beautiful. If you've never been to Glasgow, or if you have been to Glasgow and have never visited the university, I'd encourage you to do, though. It might not be what you're expecting. We have, as you can see here, this beautiful old building, but we also have some brand new buildings that have been put up in the last few years on a site that was formerly occupied by the West Sun Infirmary, which was a hospital here in Glasgow. On that site, the university have really invested in new buildings, which are also aiming to really engage with the local community. Before I start talking about the chaplaincy specifically, I wanted to just highlight a couple of the issues that are challenging university communities across the UK. At the moment, won't come as any surprise that mental well-being of staff and students is probably top of the list of challenges that are faced everywhere in the UK, I think, at the moment, but at universities no less. And as a similar point, community cohesion and particularly post-COVID, as people have come back to some of the activities that were suspended during that pandemic. I just wanted to flag a recent study just to illustrate this that was published this year by TAB, which, as I'm sure you'll know, is a student news site, which just gives some really quite shocking figures, I think, for the levels of anxiety and mental ill health that students report at the moment. I'll let you digest those numbers yourselves, but this graph I think is quite useful just to show the increased incidence of reporting of mental health conditions since 2010 to 11 to 2020 and 21. So these are some of the challenges that we in chaplaincy are trying to help and are coming up against fairly regularly. So I'm going to introduce you now to the chaplaincy here at the University of Glasgow. As I say, I will show you the chapel in a minute, but I just want to introduce the chaplaincy first. And there's no one really better to do that than our chaplain, the Reverend Dr. Carolyn Kelly. I did a little interview with her earlier in the week, and I'm really grateful for her for agreeing to take part in this and sharing her thoughts on chaplaincy here at the university. So I'll let her introduce it herself, and then I'll just pop down some facts on a slide after she's spoken.
Sure, thanks, Katie. This chaplaincy both reflects the historic character and founding of the university and the Christian tradition, as well as the lived realities and diverse beliefs of the community today. And this means that we have both aspects represented in the chaplaincy and the chapel. Services in the chapel honour and reflect that rich tradition, the riches of the music, the texts, the ancient texts and prayer. And it also seeks to explore and express that richness in thoughtful, contemporary ways. And that means acknowledging the different strands in the Christian tradition. It's by no means a monolithic tradition. But in addition, and really importantly, the scope of the chaplaincy is broader and it reflects our diverse community. So there are people in the university from all over the world and who hold a variety of beliefs and religious affiliations. And this means that we're also mindful of the 2/3 or so who cite no religion in their beliefs, as well as those significant minorities or groups, say, who align with Muslim, Sikh, Hindu, pagan, or other beliefs. Yeah.
I also thought it would be interesting to ask Carolyn about the aims of the chaplaincy specifically, and here's what she said.
Our aims are to both express and be true to and give form to that faith. And in one dimension, that's the Christian faith and Christian tradition. Another is to support and honour and foster the faith and beliefs of all in the university community, whatever those positions are. But obviously that's a very wide brief, so we can't possibly attend to all of that, but we do what we can with a variety of honorary chaplains and with some things that we hold at the university. Another aim is to provide pastoral and spiritual care and support for people. And that's a really important aspect, and particularly we're aligned with the student services to be part of that offering of support and care and well-being and inclusion. Another aim, I think, and it's kind of not official, but it's the aim of reflection and giving time to think about meaning and to pause in an increasingly pressured life, workplace, study place, to think about what really matters to us as individuals and communities. What are the things we need to think about deeply? And the complex challenges of today require some deep reflection and space, and they require space around them to deal with the changes and the stresses that those things bring. So I think that's an aim as well.
So just to summarise some of those things that Carolyn mentioned, the university website states that the University of Glasgow is a diverse community in which the cultural, religious and philosophical beliefs of its students, staff and visitors are respected and celebrated. So as Carolyn mentioned, we have 16 honorary chaplains from different faith backgrounds who work with us here at the chaplaincy. There's also a separate Catholic chaplaincy who we work closely with, and they have their own chapel on campus too. We look after spaces for prayer and reflection, including the chapel, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, but also various prayer rooms and reflection spaces and a bookable interfaith room, which we manage here, which is near to the chapel. We offer events and opportunities for interfaith dialogue and connection. And one of the most important aspects of the work of the chaplaincy that Carolyn mentioned was the pastoral support that we offer for students and staff. And this is working alongside student services who offer counselling and other methods of support, including financial aid. We offer a programme of services in the chapel, as you might expect, and these are from various denominations: ecumenical, Anglican, Catholic, Church of Scotland. We also offer special services. These can include things marking aspects of the university year, like Remembrance Sunday, carol services, and we also have some special services, which Carolyn will talk to us about in a little while. We also mark life events at the university. We have weddings, funerals, memorial services, and blessings for the lives of new babies as well. And in addition, we often host in the chapel concerts and events of various types all throughout the year. So it's a busy place to work and there's lots going on. I'm going to talk a little bit now about the actual building itself, of the chapel, and our programme of services and how we really are trying to match what we're offering to what the community, we think the community are really looking for. I'm going to start off by looking at the general chapel programme of events, and then we're going to have a little case study on the Anglican services that we're offering here in the chapel. So, as promised, just a little glance into our home in the University Chapel. This video is taken from a longer video we made for the Glasgow Buildings Preservation Trust during the pandemic, and in it the choir themselves introduce you to the spaces, and you get to see a lot more of the chapel and of the main building. But I just thought it would give you an idea of the space we're working in. It's beautiful stained glass. It was built as a war memorial, and at the top you might make out some panels there. That's the names of all the students and staff that died. There are similar panels for the Second World War. Those ones at the top of the First World War. And as you can see, there's lots of beautiful wooden carving. There's also lots of lovely stone carving. And if you watch this video, you'll be able to hear the choir speaking about that, but also Kevin Bowyer, our organist. And I'll pop a link to the end. However, I could spend all week talking about the chapel, and we're not really here to talk about the building, so I will leave that there. So I'm going to introduce you to the regular pattern of weekly services that we have here in the University Chapel. We deliberately try and make sure that these happen at different times of the day, on different days of the week, so that we're hoping that there's something on offer for everybody. And they're of all different denominations and also ecumenical services. So there really is something for everybody, we hope. You'll notice here that I haven't mentioned any Catholic masses, and that's because, as I mentioned before, Turnbull Hall is a separate chaplaincy. They have a very busy programme of masses and other services, and we do work closely with them, but I've not included them here because those services tend to take place in the Catholic chaplaincy, which is up at Turnbull Hall. So we have weekday morning services 3 days a week, 8:45. These are in person and on Zoom, and they are led usually by a chaplain or by a member of the academic community, or by a student, or the CU sometimes lead those services, or even by local ministers. And they are Christian services and they are ecumenical. We have lunchtime services. For example, we have an Iona-style worship on a Tuesday lunchtime, and we have a service for Trinity College, which is the Church of Scotland's training college here at the University of Glasgow. And the services that I am most involved in are the Tuesday evening services with the chapel choir. At the moment, we have a programme of Teze, Evensong and Eucharist, which rotates around. And on the fourth Tuesday, we have a concert. So there's always something happening on a Tuesday evening. And 3 times out of 4, it's a service. In addition to those weekly events, we have annual, termly or semesterly events. These include services with Turnbull Hall as the Catholic chaplaincy. We have services giving thanks for life of children, so to marking the arrival of babies often. We have services of thanksgiving for people who've left their bodies to the anatomy department, and Carolyn's going to touch on that when I let her speak in a moment. We have, unsurprisingly, a service of remembrance, which is obviously happening or will have happened just a couple of days ago, and that takes place usually in the Butte Hall, actually, rather than the chapel, due to the number of people that attend. We have services of we have carol services at Christmas, obviously, of various different kinds, trying to really engage with as many people as we possibly can. So traditional 9 lessons. We have family carol services that are less formal and use less formal Bible readings, and we have carol singing in the cloisters. And then we also go out to other churches, and we sing, for example, at Glasgow Cathedral once a year. That's not a local church, actually, but it's where the university was founded in the 15th century. And that service has been taking place for as long as anyone can remember. We'll go there one day in the new year, and we have a special service marking the university's foundation. We sing regularly at Wellington Church, which is just across the road from the university, and really is the Church of Scotland Church really sitting on campus, and they do a lot of outreach work themselves with the community. And also we sing at St Bride's, which is one of the local Episcopal churches. And then as well as those services, we also have special services in a population the size of Glasgow University, with, as I've said before, 43,000 students and 8,000 members of staff. You are sadly going to statistically have some deaths every year, and we often hold memorial services and funerals. These obviously are very sad, but it's really important that we're able to offer a space for people to really grieve and to mark those occasions. The choir often will sing at those, and the choir will also often sing at those events. And then we also offer vigils for major events. For example, Ukraine. More recently, we also had an event to mark, or to just to reflect on the unrest in the Middle East. We don't. These are often quite informal. They often will take place over quite a long period of time, maybe a few hours, so that people can drop in. Sometimes there'll be a sort of regular cycling prayer, or perhaps a little bit of music. There'll often be candles. They're really just an opportunity for people to just sit and reflect. And then at the bottom, I've just included a little list of some of the other things that happen regularly in chapel. So other concerts, other discussion groups, opportunities for people to come into the space and to meet other members of the community. I'm going to now invite Carolyn just to talk a little bit more about why we have our services when we have them. And you'll notice that we don't have a regular service on a Sunday, so she's also going to touch on that.
Our regular services now, instead of being on a Sunday, are on a Tuesday evening. And there are 2 reasons for that. One is the day reflects a working day. It's on a day when people are more likely to be here. And I see chaplaincy in the chapel as part of a working university. So that's the first point, but it's also about time. And I think we have the services just after the working day. So it's just for a brief time, less than an hour. People can come and be part of something and experience something of really high quality, both in terms of thinking and the content that's discussed, but also the musical experience in this incredibly beautiful space, which is the chapel. So we want to make that as available as possible to people to experience, but not just to come in and take photos or to view it, but to experience it in the way it was designed, to bring people together for reflection, to bring people together to sing, and to bring people together to lament and to mourn, and to provide comfort to one another, and in the face of the challenges, not only of personal life, but of what's going on around them.
I thought it'd be a nice opportunity to give you a little break at this point and listen to a little bit of our most recent Teze service in chapel. So it'll give you an idea of the style of worship that we adopt during Teze. You'll see, you might not be able to make out, but the choir are not gowned. We dress informally, and the congregation sit with us in the stalls. We encourage them to sit there rather than in the chairs at the back. We introduced the service of Teze when Carolyn came to the university, which coincided with the pandemic and the end of the pandemic. In Scotland, you may remember, you'll remember I'm sure wherever you are that singing was under restrictions, and that when we came back to singing, we had to have a certain amount of distance between each singer. And in Scotland, that actually continued for quite a long time after it had finished in England. And so when we first were able to sing in chapel, we were initially at 2 meters distance and then 1 meter distance. So we were looking for music that was perhaps a little bit more straightforward than what we might have normally planned. And Teze really offered that. And the choir, I think, perhaps were a little resistant to us introducing this, because it is very easy. The music, it doesn't require any sight reading ability, really. Once you've heard it a couple of times, you've got the tune. But they've really come around to the idea, and they love the inclusive nature of the service, and they love the fact that people they really enjoy the atmosphere we create. It's quite dark. You can't really tell from this picture. And they enjoy the meditative quality. We were really fortunate to have a visit during COP26 when it was held here in Glasgow from 2 monks from Teze, and they really helped us to understand properly how services can flow in a Teze service, and to really value that period of silence that is part of at the middle of the service. So I'll let you just listen to the end of this song, and then Carolyn is also just going to add a few thoughts.
Teze prayers and music are an ideal form for a setting like this, because they're accessible. Musically, they're very accessible. The music is a way in to something that allows for silence and reflection and prayer for those who want to join. I think Teze music is it's simple, it's accessible, it's relatively inclusive. It's still very much reflecting the Christian tradition, but it's not imposing that on those who want to participate in it. And it's shifting away from, say, verbal preaching or sharing of the content of Christianity to a much more experiential and accessible form. Yeah. And I think our choir do a terrific job with that.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you. I also asked Carolyn just to reflect on the service for donors to anatomy, just to kind of contextualise that a little bit, which it'll be taking place in a couple of weeks here at the university. It's a closed service just for members of the family of people who have donated their bodies, and it includes addresses both from professors of anatomy and from the chaplains, but also from the students themselves who talk about what the generosity of the donor's gift of their bodies means for their studies.
So we also, another regular event in the chapel calendar is the service of giving thanks for those who have bequeathed, who've donated their bodies for research, and that's a very moving and very special service. So each year we work together with the medical school, the anatomy lab, and those who care for the people who have died and given their bodies for research. And that's a very special thing. It's a connection of the ancient traditions of the chapel and of the church with the current research and identity of the university. And having been involved in that in New Zealand as well as here, I think that's a really fruitful way for chaplaincy to be part of the community. And it just allows and gives form to how do we appreciate, how do we give thanks for this giving of oneself in this way, and how do we put things around that give that dignity and give pause and give comfort for those who have lost their loved ones. But there's a lot of thankfulness and a lot of appreciation from the Department of Anatomy and from the School of Anatomy and the students themselves as well. So yeah, that's a very special moment in the calendar.
And from a musical point of view, that's often quite an interesting service to programme the music for, because it's a service in a chapel, and it has some elements of a standard church service. It has prayer, but also we want to make sure that anyone who isn't Christian or doesn't have that background is still very welcome to come and attend. So the music, we do include sacred music, but we also will often include another sort of reflective, relevant folk song perhaps, or reflective secular piece. I also asked Carolyn just to talk a little bit about the vigils. We've had quite a lot of major events since Carolyn came to the university, so not just the pandemic itself, of course, which many people lost members of their family during, but also we've had a war break out in Europe for the first time in a long time, and just recently we've had the events in the Middle East. So it's how we react, how we as a community at the university react to those events. What we offer in terms of support is something that obviously the chaplaincy is very involved in.
One of the reasons I think chaplaincy is still very much alive and appropriate for a university, even in a contemporary secular university, is that we need some way, some mechanism to help focus and hold loss and change. And I think terrible things happen to communities and worldwide, which we don't always know how to respond to those. And it's not about offering answers, but it's about allowing space for those things to be marked and for people to be held with them in dignity and kindness, and to bring in some of the resources of our ancient music, for example, or prayer or silence, to put around that and hold and mark those moments of real difficulty and trauma and stress. And I think of some of the events in the past decade or so where people have felt quite overwhelmed at the scale of what is happening or they're facing, whether wars or invasions, climatic or ecological disasters. And the chapel and the chaplaincy can be part of what responds to that and offers times of vigil, of silence, of music, of remembrance. And we're certainly learning how to do that and what can be put into that to make that meaningful and safe for those who are suffering. So memorial services are another, at a more personal level, they're a way of supporting and acknowledging the death of students or staff, particularly in those in the university community. Because, you know, we love to celebrate the dreams and achievements of our young people and of our research and our staff. And this is a community with so much opportunity and positivity to celebrate. But the reality is that we all are fragile and we're human, and things happen that we can't control or plan. And loss and death are part of life. And chaplaincy is one of the things in the university that says, let's be with you in that, let's hold that and mark that and provide some support around that as well.
So having spoken to the chaplain a little bit about some of the services that she's involved directly with, I thought it would be interesting to speak to our Anglican chaplains. We have two honorary Anglican chaplains, and I'll let them introduce themselves in a moment. And as you know, we have monthly Eucharist and Evensong as part of our Tuesday evening programme. Oliver and Kelvin have been with us for about just over a year now, because they're into their second year, and it's been really interesting developing our Anglican offering and working with them to develop our programme of services.
I'm Kelvin Holdsworth. I'm, as well as being the Provost of St Mary's Cathedral in Glasgow, I'm one of the honorary Anglican chaplains at the University of Glasgow. So that means coming up to the university and helping people to find inspiration, helping people to find God, helping people to find their way as students or staff in the university, and doing it on the university campus. And I've done this kind of thing in a few institutions. I've done it in the University of London and the University of Stirling, and now in the University of Glasgow. And I've seen chaplaincy change a bit during that time.
I'm with Kelvin as one of the other Anglican chaplains here at the university, and we work as part of a team of interfaith chaplains. So there are people represented from all different kinds of faiths and those from no faith tradition at all.
So Oliver and Kelvin joined us post-pandemic as the new chaplains, and we'd had a regular pattern of once monthly evensongs for the previous few years. Well, for probably about a decade before that, and we attracted smallish congregations, but they were fairly regular. The people who came, congregation was fairly established. But post-pandemic, obviously, everything changed. A lot of people who had been coming weren't wanting to come out so much, and we had 2 new chaplains, so it was a good opportunity for us to just reset what we were doing. And Oliver will talk to you, I think, a little bit about what the approach was. What we wanted to do was really build the congregation back, but also to attract new people into the chapel. One of the things that's come through, I think, in these interviews is how keen we are that people feel that this chapel is for them, even if they're not from a Christian background, that this chapel is here to commemorate people who gave their lives in the First World War, all of whom were students or staff members. But now it's not a memorial. It's not just a memorial. It's a real place where people can come to mark whatever they want to mark, and to be while they're at university and after they leave university. It's really a place for everybody. And so the question that Oliver and Kelvin started at was, how do we get people to come into this space, particularly if they're perhaps not from an Episcopal or an Anglican background?
The thing I told Kelvin was, people are going to come to an event. And that's what we set out to do, to create a fantastic event that would be unmissable, that people would have to come to. And with an amazing chapel choir, an incredible building, we knew we had the tools to give people an experience of something exceptional and to come close to God. So we set up these services in the hopes that if we built it, they would come. And boy, did they.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. I think it's about giving people excuses to engage with the church and the beliefs of the church. And music is the most fabulous excuse. It's not the only one. And even with what we're doing here in Glasgow, and we have this pattern of Eucharists and choral evensongs, but within that, each one of them has a theme. Each one of them is an event. Yeah. The one that we're just waiting for in a few minutes is all themed around an art exhibition that's going on in the chapel. We've got people coming from the art, someone who's an expert in looking at pictures to talk about that as part of the service. So it's trying to reach out into the university and receive from the university and engage with what the university is doing, because people are here to study and to learn, and we're taking that into the services as well. But all of that allows us to build something that's incredibly rich. Fabulous music is the bedrock of that. It's the core thing that holds that all together. But into that, we can then invite other things.
You heard mention then of our most recent evensong, which was linked to an exhibition that goes on in chapel. Quite often the space at the back of the chapel, which is now level, flat, and has 3 bare walls, is used as a hanging space for exhibitions, usually with some link to the university or specifically to spirituality. And we've just finished, or just about to finish, hosting an exhibition by the artist Egon Altdorf, who's a German artist, and I'll just show you a few pictures just now to give you a flavour of that. So we had the opportunity of matching both a concert and a service to this, and we were able to commission a new piece by John LeGrove. I say commission, he kindly wrote us a piece, and it's a fantastic piece. We programmed relevant music, so and this was with guidance from the curator, who was actually John LeGrove's wife, Judith, and other family members. Dorian, who is Altdorf's son, was involved in organising this exhibition as well. So we had music by Hugo Dissler and Cardoso, and we, as Kelvin mentioned, we had a guest speaker from History of Art who drew on images in the exhibition, and the Anglican Chapel has produced a specially designed order of service with the art reproduced, so that it was a little bit like being in a History of Art lecture, but it was directly related to the readings that were set for that day. So it was a really special service, and something that we were able to do similar things throughout the year. So we might link some of our academic services to to exhibitions, other exhibitions, or it might be linked to other things going on at the university, like ongoing research potentially, or sometimes we take architectural inspiration from the chapel, which has stained glass windows of the Saints of Scotland, or some of the carvings in the chapel, like this one of the sower. I went on to ask Oliver and Calvin, really following up from that, about leaning into the academic nature of our setting, as well as obviously reaching out into the community, the university community and the local community. But what is it that's special about being positioned on a university campus that we can really bring to our offering?
I think that one of the ways that we try and lean into the academic life of the university is that we don't sell religion short. We've got a deep tradition, both musically and theologically, and we never do anything by halves. We tend to embrace all the layers that we can add to a service, with the music, with the theology, with the visual things that we see. This is a very, very rich experience. And into that, we've been able to invite people sometimes to preach or to speak or to pray, who are bringing their own expertise from the university in with them. So it's engaging with the university community. Every department here has rich tradition. So does Christianity. So does church music. And I think that we want to engage just as seriously with that tradition as the people who are studying here in any of the departments.
And our tradition helps us process the things that are going on here at this university. The learning, the research, all of the new experiences that people are having. Religion and religious experiences help synthesize that, and that's one of the things that we hope to do.
I asked Oliver and Calvin a little bit about why choral evensong and Eucharist are so popular, and what it is that perhaps people makes people want to come to those services specifically.
I always called evensong in cathedrals and great choral institutions as the gateway drug into faith. There is a place for people to come and sit and watch this grand event happening, and let it happen to them. And I think that's another important aspect of what we're able to offer.
Also, good music provides an excuse for people to come.
That's right.
Because people need a reason to come.
Yes.
I used to work in a chaplaincy where our excuse for people to turn up was that we had the best coffee on campus.
Well.
Now, coffee's improved in many campuses, and that doesn't work anymore. But what we're offering is a significant experience of glorious music. You can come just for the music if you like, or you can tell people that that's why you're coming.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter. You're going to experience something that is beyond what you could possibly expect when you come to these services.
Yes.
And that's exciting.
Mm.
And the final clip I'm going to show you just now of Oliver and Kelvin really helps set up what I want to talk about next, which is about community and what we really mean by community when we're thinking about people working in similar roles to me, or with choirs in whatever context they happen to be working in. And I began this little chat with them by asking them again, similarly to a question that I asked Carolyn, why it is that evening time, this twilight post-work time, seems to be working well for a modern university like Glasgow.
Yeah.
Yeah, certainly evening services have worked for us rather than the lunchtime thing. I think it used to be in universities. I can remember a time in universities where people had fairly set patterns, and universities worked in the morning, then everyone had lunch, and then everybody worked in the evening, and then they went away. Now, universities are scheduling things all the way through the day. There is no lunchtime that everyone is free for. it used to always be that Wednesday afternoons everyone was free for, and that's broken down a wee bit as well. So the times that you used to be able to be sure of people are not really there anymore. And in this institution, 6 o'clock on a Tuesday is a time when more people are free. So that does work for us.
And Kelvin, people don't hang around universities like they used to.
Yeah.
So people have places to go, things to do.
Students are working.
That's exactly right. So setting a time at the end of a day, actually we've found gave more opportunity for folk who are busy and aren't just happened to be around.
It also helps make a link with local people who are not immediately part of the university community. It brings people onto the campus who want to come to these services as well. And for whatever reason, people are being attracted to the services that we're doing from outside the immediate university community. And that's really quite exciting because most universities, that's one of their core goals at the moment, is to engage with the community, is to engage with the city, and this is one of the ways in which we're being able to do that.
So leading on from what Kelvin was talking about, reaching out into the local community, which is obviously really important for a university like Glasgow, I want to talk about the communities that we serve. The first community is probably the most obvious community, and it almost needs no explanation, but I am going to just mention a couple of things about it, and that's the community within the chapel choir itself. Many of you, I'm sure, are members or have been members of choirs in the past, and you'll know that the many benefits of singing in a choir, so I won't rehearse those again for you, but university choirs have a very special feel to them, particularly university choirs like Glasgow, where the students spend so much time with each other, simply because they spend so much time rehearsing together, but also they go on trips away and tours, and that leads to, or hopefully, and it's certainly the case in Glasgow, leads to a really tight-knit community that's welcoming and is always welcoming of new members, but is also a really strong foundation for them as a friendship group. And I think having, in addition, having a home in a big, massive university like Glasgow and having a group of people that you know well. The other thing, just to mention, and I'll try not to get too tied up in this, is this idea that students who are members of university chapel choirs get to see a side of university life that isn't necessarily that accessible to everybody. Most students these days won't, for example, wear an academic gown until they graduate. They won't be aware that actually undergrads used to wear undergraduate gowns. And here at Glasgow, as with the other ancient universities in Scotland, the undergraduate gowns were red. And when I was a student here back in the late 90s, our choir gowns were actually the old undergraduate gowns, which were horrible. They were made of this horrible thick wool. They were very, very warm, which was handy at times, but not necessarily that pleasant. They also got eaten by moths quite a lot. Anyway, the students in chapel choirs do get to see that. They get to wear a gown. They like that. They're very attracted to. The day they get to put their gown on for the first time. The first years are really, really pleased to do it. They also get to see some of the traditions of the universities, which perhaps are not visible to other people because they're spending time on other campuses or in departments where they only see like medicine. They tend to stick with medical students. So it's a real privilege, and the students in the choir are very, very pleased to have that level of insight that perhaps isn't afforded to other students. I could talk about that for a lot longer, but I've managed to limit it to 3 minutes. So moving on, the next community, again, is probably an obvious one, and we have talked about them already, but that is the people that come to our events and to our concerts. And we always try to grow that audience. That's one of the I suppose the ever-present challenge for everybody, whether you're running a secular choir or a church choir, is how to get more people into your services, how to get more people to join your choir. So in terms of attracting people to our services, Oliver and Kelvin do a lot in advertising our Anglican events, and we advertise widely for the chaplaincy events and for our own concerts. But we also try and look after our audience. So we do tea and coffee after all our events. and we try and really make them feel a part of what's going on. It's one of the real attractions of doing Teze as well, when people feel really included. But again, those are perhaps the most obvious communities that you'd expect us to be working with as a chapel choir. I want to talk next about the outreach work we do on top of our services. So as well as offering services and events that are open to the university community and the wider community, we also offer an outreach program that I'm responsible for, because I have responsibility for some of the other choirs on campus. So the longest standing choir on campus, apart from the chapel choir, is the University Choral Society, which has been going for as long as anyone can remember, since the dawn of time, and it continues to attract good numbers. Actually, we're doing well for numbers since the pandemic as well. That's been lovely to see those numbers grow again. But we've also set up a community choir here, which is aimed at people who perhaps have never sung in a choir before, and people who have sung in a choir. It's ideal for people who don't read music, but it's also inclusive of people who do. And we've been running that with the Faculty of Arts since since before the pandemic, but we did carry on online, and now we're back, thankfully, in real life since the pandemic. I'm going to let Andy, who's is the member of staff in arts who's helps us run that choir, speak about it in a moment. But one of the things that's really interesting about it is when you see him speak, you'll see he's actually in a hall in Wellington Church, which is the church opposite the university. And one of the problems that we have in running that choir is finding space. Space in busy universities is at a premium, and we have to move around, which is not ideal if you're trying to build up a choir. But actually, it means that we get to use some quite unusual spaces. For example, that hall in Wellington. Last week, we were in the Hunterian Museum. Here we all are, doing the modelling the dinosaur position that's behind us. And we sang in the cloisters recently. Next week, we're down in the Ark, which is one of the new buildings. So that's a really positive thing. And Andy will, I think, explain a little bit about what people get out of that choir.
I think it's a really good way for people to break with their routine and to meet other people that are working in perhaps different areas of the university or studying. Just to get out of your chair and do something that's a little bit different. And there's something about singing that seems to make people feel good. You know, it gives them a lift in the middle of the week. I suppose some people can find it difficult to meet others from different teams, whether they be staff or whether they be students. So the community aspect, we always have a little break in the middle of our session. It gives people a chance to chat with other people and get to know them. So yeah, I think that's the one positive thing that we can bring to the community of University of Glasgow.
Surely one of many positive things we can bring.
A plethora of things.
One of the other great things about the University Community Choir is that we're able to give younger conductors the opportunity to lead the choir with me. So I have working with me at the moment a colleague of mine who has just finished a PhD, actually studying choirs, and she's an experienced choral leader. She works specifically with choirs for breathing and lung health. And we've also got a younger student younger graduate, recent graduate called Ali, who's also getting an opportunity to gain experience as a choir leader by working with us there. Training and offering training opportunities for younger conductors is something that we also do at the chapel choir. We have a conducting scholarship, and that's been going for some years now. In addition to the community choir and the choral society, which runs throughout the year, we also offer one-off workshops in various art forms. So, for example, recently we had a visiting academic from the University of the West Indies, and we held a workshop in the chapel looking at African choral music, which he led. We've also had gospel workshops recently, which were organised by Music in the University, but again in the chapel. We also hold one-off community events like Come and Sings. We've done the Fore Requiem and the Vivaldi Gloria, I think, and we're doing a Christmas Come and Sing in a few weeks' time to offer people an opportunity who might not be in a choir but fancy singing carols not just carol singing, congregational carols, but also singing some slightly harder carols. And we also have fairly regular events, community events in the summer. We have a big hymn singing, which we've not held for a few years, but we are hoping to come back to next year, which is a hymn singing event for anybody from anywhere. Certainly something that I've noticed a lot is that hymns are sung less and less and less in schools in Scotland, certainly. And people tend to not know even some hymns that I would have thought everyone would know. So we're trying to kind of offer that as an opportunity for the local community, and it's actually proved really popular. And yes, we're hoping to get that back on its feet after the pandemic this coming year. So as we approach the end of this brief introduction to the work of the chaplaincy here, and specifically how our worship and how our music is reaching out into our communities, and how we're trying to serve the communities, I want to just mention our concert series, which we haven't really touched on. I mentioned that there were lots of concerts in chapel, and we actually have a regular concert series called Choral Contemplations that the chapel choir offer. That happens on the Tuesdays when we aren't doing services, and the idea there is to offer this continuity of service. So there's always something at 6:10 in the chapel on a Tuesday evening, whether that's a service or a concert. We, as you might have guessed from speaking to Oliver and Kelvin in particular, we try very hard to match that to themes of research at the university, to different specialities. So we've had guest speakers, artwork that might be going on in the chapel. We've already mentioned that. And in addition to offering the choir themselves an opportunity to develop their singing, to interact with a repertoire of music that they might not get if they were only singing for liturgical services, or not as much of. So we do some chamber choir repertoire, and we're able to obviously sing a lot more secular music than a chapel choir that was only singing for services might do. I thought I'd just let Kevin Bowyer have a quick word, as we have him here as our resident organist. We're extremely fortunate. He runs a weekly organ concert series on a Wednesday lunchtime, and I asked him a little bit about the community of people that come along to that concert.
Oh God, I don't know. What does it bring? For God's sake? Who wants to go to an organ concert anyway?
Well, quite.
Yeah, keep that in. Okay. We have a dedicated organ recital audience here. The organ's very versatile, so it can play music of pretty much any school. We've had the complete organ symphonies of Widor, the complete organ music of Vienne, lots of Bach, lots of César Franck, lots of Mendelssohn, you name it pretty much, and we've done it.
Another thing that we do quite a lot of here is work with students, both student organists, so we have organ scholars and organ students on occasion, but also we do work with the music department on composition. Do you want to tell us a little bit about the sort of workshops that we run, both the organ workshops and perhaps if you want to touch on the choral workshops too?
Yeah. For some years now, I've been involved in encouraging the composers in the music department to write for the organ. Composers approaching the organ are often intimidated by the instrument because they don't know how to write for it. They don't really know what the feet can do. They've heard that the organist uses his feet, but they're not quite sure what that really means. And they have preconceptions of the way the organ is played. I mean, is it very much like a piano? Is there a sustaining pedal? Can you do with the organ keyboards more or less what you can do with the piano keyboards? And of course, no. The answer to that is no. So we run workshops initially to let the composers know how to write for the organ, what they need to know, what they don't need to know, what might be useful but not essential for them to know, and then they go away and they write their pieces, and I play their pieces. I learn the music and I play their pieces to them, and we talk about the strengths and the weaknesses of what they've done. And often there are really good things. It's quite rare there's something which is completely useless. Such things have been known, but certainly in recent years it's been a really stimulating area for me to work in. And the same goes for the composers working with the choir. We get some interesting ideas, some are practical, some are not, but they're all worth investigating and sorting out. It's a challenge for the choir as well as for the composer, and likewise a challenge for me as an organist as well as the composers.
I'm sure some of you will have met Kevin. He's a real asset to us here. We're so fortunate to have him as a colleague, and he is rightly renowned for his contemporary organ playing, particularly the work of Sarabji, who wrote these massively long organ symphonies, which are a real marathon to play. So if you ever get the opportunity to hear him play, I thoroughly recommend it. So as we draw towards the end of this lecture, I'd like to try and sort of draw my thoughts together. I found the whole process of conducting these interviews really interesting, and just getting to really speak about the aims of our chaplaincy and the work that we're doing has been a really interesting process. And there are some common ideas that I think kept coming back when I was interviewing various people. The first of those is that music itself is often the attraction, and that's okay. We heard Oliver and Kelvin talking about that, but I think that it's true also of Teze. If we are getting people into spaces and into the chapel in particular, and they're getting something out of our services, whether that is just an appreciation of the music or whether it's something else, that's fine. I want people to come into the chapel and experience the music, experience worship, sure, but also experience the space, which I really believe is a space for everybody at the university, whether they're religious or not. It's such a beautiful place, and it marks such a horrible war that killed so many members of our community at the university. Okay, it was over 100 years ago, but this chapel really is there to remind us of that, and to mark and remember their names. But it's not just that memorial. I said this at the beginning. It's a living place, and it's important to me and to my team, the team of people I work with here, that people know the chapel is there, and that they feel able to come in if they'd like to, no matter what their background. And another thing that's come up, and again it's come up with in a few of the conversations, is that we're offering a diverse offering of services. We are offering Anglican services, Church of Scotland services, lots of ecumenical services, and as well as specialist services for various different groups. And we can't possibly offer something that's going to be exactly what everyone is looking for, and we can't possibly offer a perfect program that's going to suit everyone. You can never please everybody. What we're trying to do is offer as varied a program as we can manage without making our workload absolutely enormous, and we're hoping that it's accessible enough to as many people as possible without dumbing anything down, which I don't think we are at all. And I'll come back to that idea in a minute when I talk about one of my other conclusions. My next point was about accessible traditions and access to traditions. I think that it's really important when we're in a university context that we make any service we're offering as accessible to our congregations as possible. So what do I mean by that? I mean that our orders of service, for example, are printed large enough for people to read, that they include music. If people are music readers, they can then join in with the hymns if they don't know them. That we tell people when to stand up and sit down, particularly if we're trying to attract new people. Just everybody knowing what to do when isn't necessarily going to make it easy to join in. If we tell everybody in the order of service, that solves that problem. And access to traditions, that's again harking back to this idea that people who come to a university like Glasgow, with all its history and its beautiful buildings, they do want to see a bit of those traditional things. They want to see it with a light touch, the academic dress and people carrying maces and some of the other traditions that we have going on here. And an example of that I believe demonstrates this is the number of people that are always on campus in the cloisters or having their photographs taken. People like the idea of the traditional university, but I think we need to make sure that as many people as possible can access actually access those traditions. So getting them involved in activities of the chapel choir as congregation members or as singing in the choir is one way we can do that. My next point is about responding to events locally, nationally and internationally. I think it's vitally important that we do that. We often will reprogram services or concerts in light of what's going on in the world. A good example of that was we were doing a concert a couple of years ago based on computer game music, core music in computer games. Really fascinating concert. One of the pieces we programmed was really quite epic. It was quite warfare-y. It was a particularly violent game, and we decided not to sing that particular piece just because there was it was when the fighting in Ukraine was really getting quite complicated, and we just felt it was the wrong time to be sort of referencing war in our concert in such a strong way. Another good example was actually, I think the last concert we actually did before the pandemic, before lockdown kicked in, and we'd planned a concert based on the idea of the apocalypse, and we'd had it planned for quite a number of months because there's lots of really fantastic music that has this kind of apocalyptic flavour. We'd included a few pieces based on the plague and relating to St. Sebastian, and we cut back quite a number of those because it just did seem a little bit too close to the bone. And similarly in services, we might reprogram even song music, for example, we've talked already about the vigils that we offer and the other ways that the chaplaincy offers support, both to individuals and to the community. Acknowledging, responding to and including academic ideas. This, I think, is really important for a university and really important for our community, that we are meeting the expectations of our colleagues. And that, I think, means rightly that we do try and engage with the work they're doing, but also that we are reflecting an academic approach when appropriate. For example, Oliver and Kelvin talked about the recent service we did for the Altdorf exhibition. So getting an academic in to come and explain some of the artwork to us, which was genuinely revealing. I know nothing about visual art, and there was so much to learn just from that very short sermon. And my final point on this slide is, again, a link to the fact that we're a learning institution, is that we're in a position that we can offer training opportunities. We can involve, for example, the singers of chapel choir in the organisation of the choir and the organisation of services, should they wish. And certainly the Anglican chaplains always have students helping at services. I think that it's really important that we are able to pass on the knowledge that we have, exchange that knowledge, and that we're able to offer people who want to develop their skills in choral conducting, for example, the opportunity to do that. Thank you. So I think that probably brings me to the end of my time. Thank you so much for listening. It's a bit weird recording this lecture and knowing that I myself am watching this. I am sure I am cringing somewhere on the screen right now. I'm very, very happy to answer any questions that you may have about our work here at the chaplaincy, about our approach to some of the community-based work that we do. And I look forward to hearing any questions you might have. If you want to get in touch with me, my email is here, and I've also put a slide together with some links to the things I've been talking about, and I imagine that could be made available by somebody after the lecture. Thank you very much.
And thank you very much, Katy, who's now joining us in person. Thank you so much for being here, but also for the recording and using the occasion of making a recording to show us the chapel and to give us some samples of the choir's work and all the various things that it was possible to do.
No problem. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Sorry for being late.
It's good to be involved in doing all of this exciting work on a Tuesday evening.
Yeah.
We're going to open for any questions or reflections that people might have on what they've heard thus far, or perhaps they have some particular questions that they might wish to ask. Please go ahead and ask.
Hi. Oh, okay. Hey, thank you very much. That was really interesting and rather inspiring. I think one of the things that struck me is that there is a place within that chapel for every type of singer. So you don't have to sort of mush them all into one ensemble and hope that, you know, some of your musicians who are lacking will somehow by osmosis get the skills, and others, you know, who may feel a lot of pressure, you know, are not pressurized in that sense. My question to you is, because singing is such a big part of that chapel, when people audition, do you have sort of a list of all the different groups for them? And are any recommendations made with regard to that? Say you've got somebody who has a shaky grasp on reading music, but they really want to sing with the chapel choir. You've got an alternative for them that's equally as important.
Yeah, so I mean, we, as you probably tell, we've got quite a lot going on chorally here, which is we're really fortunate about. And we don't have, we always have more people audition than we have space for, which is really sad. More, not always can we match people who want, everyone who's desperate to be in the choir can get in. More often than not, though, the people that we don't let in are, it's really because they wouldn't enjoy it because their reading isn't good enough or their ear isn't good enough. We can cope with someone not having the most brilliant sight reading skills if they've got a brilliant ear, but or if they've got an amazing sight reading skills and perhaps they're all is a little lacking. We can deal with both the situations, and we regularly take people who are perhaps not excellent at both. But if they don't have either, or if one's very, very poor, then we will offer them other opportunities. So as I said, we have the Choral Society, we have various other choirs I haven't even mentioned on campus, and not all of them are based in the chapel, not all of them are religious choirs, but we also have a list of all the other choirs in the city. And because I know certainly the liturgical choirs, I can point them in the direction of ones which that if their reading's not brilliant, they might enjoy. But we also encourage people, if for example it's just a sight reading issue, we'll encourage them to go and sing with another reading choir like the University Choral Society, and then we really try and genuinely get them to believe that we want them to come back and re-audition. And sometimes they do. Often they think we're just palming them off, I think, and we're genuinely not. And we try and make it as clear as possible that we really believe that we can help them. In the past, we've also done sort of sight reading classes and that kind of thing, but it's just a workload issue really for most. But we do the community choir, we often do elements of musicianship there, and sometimes we'll run a really targeted musicianship kind of strand to it. So yes is the answer.
Thank you.
More questions?
Could I ask a question, Matthew?
Please go ahead, Sal.
Thank you, Katy. Thanks. So that was really, really enjoyable. Thank you. And I'm a Glasgow graduate myself, so it's really lovely to hear you talk about my old university. Although I didn't sing in the chapel choir, I was really struck by how, in everything you said, how integrated the music is into the work of the chaplaincy. And I know that a lot of people aspire to that, but it's actually not. It's difficult to achieve, I think, to the extent that you articulated there. Is that something that you and your colleagues in the chaplaincy actively work at, or is it just one of these happy circumstances that you happen to have a really good team together at the same time who are kind of committed to the same approach?
Yeah, I guess it's a bit of a chicken and egg thing. I mean, the choir here, I'd love to be able to take full credit for it. It's amazing because they are a brilliant choir and they've got there's something quite special about the choir here. But my predecessors, I've been here since about 2014, but my predecessors, who were James McGraw-Smith and Giles Brightwell, and before him Stuart Campbell, who you might remember, Sal, but they've really established I mean, I'm just building on what they've done, and they've always had close working relationships with the chaplain in particular, and we've had quite a lot of chaplains. And I'm not going to pretend that they've always got on with the director of music brilliantly, but for the last recent years, it's been a fairly there's massive positives for both of us. The university are really keen to support our work and they're very proud of us, and they include us in lots of things, and that means that the work of the chaplaincy is raised a bit perhaps in areas it wouldn't normally be raised if we're a visible kind of bit of the chaplaincy. So it's useful, I think, for them to help support our work. And I think because the choir is so good and so affable, they'll support whatever the chaplain wants to do, really. So I mean, within reason, but I don't think they would necessarily be up for starting a worship band or anything. I mean, it is quite a traditional setup here, but they like Teze, they were like, yeah, I'll give this a go, and they're getting a lot out of it, genuinely a lot out of it, and that I was surprised as much as anyone about that. So yeah, I don't know whether I've answered that question, really. I think it's partly circumstance and partly that the people that we're working with here are very have a good team ethic, I suppose. And Kevin is such a talented and unusual organist that people genuinely want to support his work too.
Thank you. I think that the way you articulated how integral what you do is to the life of the university and vice versa is actually, it really is quite special. So thank you.
Long may it continue.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Father Andreas.
Thank you, Katy, for the recording and for your talk. It was really, really inspiring, really good. I felt inspired by the repertoire choices and the kind of approach towards programs that you mentioned with regards to the pandemic, but also the computer games and the kind of contemporary aspects of music that inform your approach to chapel music and to get people interested. One of the Anglican chaplains said, is any excuse to get people to engage with church. And I feel it's a sort of springboard situation of saying, this is where people are, they're interested in that, they know that. Why not have that as part of the chapel offering, really, as a springboard? Where's that creativity coming from? Is that you? Is that teamwork? Is that team building? Is this sort of inspiring conversations? Just like, let's do this and that. I feel this is a really interesting approach.
I think there's a few things. So first of all, I've been conducting choirs for quite a long time, and I would get very bored if we were just doing the same old repertoire over and over again. And I came from conducting. I conducted chamber choirs quite a lot before I came here, and because we do have this kind of secular angle too, we do have this opportunity to program secular music. And actually, exploring that repertoire, you do find music that by those composers who perhaps don't write very often for church services that are perhaps less well known. So that's one thing, me not wanting to be too bored. Another thing is Kevin himself he's such a knowledgeable colleague that he often will come up with things I've never ever heard of. And then also, I guess my background as an academic, one of John Butt, who's also, we're very fortunate really here. So John Butt, when I got the job, he said, make yourself indispensable and make the chapel choir indispensable. And I really tried to think about what he meant by that. And one of the things that I landed on was that we should try and integrate ourselves as much as possible into the research life of the university. So if, for example, a really good example, recent example, was that we did a piece by a composer called Isaac Hershaw, who was the first graduate of Glasgow in music, I think in the 1930s, or 1920s. Anyway, he was a Jewish immigrant from Germany. I'm not necessarily remembering this right, but there's a guy in Edinburgh doing a PhD about him. He started his studies here. He said he wrote this cantata, Will You Sing It, before the pandemic, and we were like, absolutely great. And then we actually did it before the summer, and BBC Radio 4 recorded it, and it was broadcast as part of a documentary, and it was such a relevant piece of research. It was about the university, it was interfaith, so it ticked all of our boxes there, and it was great music, completely forgotten. And once you start looking into these forgotten repertoires, you never need to sing Stanford again. Not that we don't sing Stanford, but Stanford plus work by less well-known composers. So and something I'm trying to do at the moment is liberate out of copyright women composers from the British Library. So every time I'm in London, I go and take photos of more out of copyright women's music and try and program that as much as I can. But yeah, so I guess it comes from circumstance and I'm so lucky to work at a university with such a great library and to be encouraged to spend my working time programming music, which is obviously a very fortunate position to be in, which I don't underappreciate.
I have a question about transferability of some of the really innovative ideas that we've been hearing about, and actually attitudes to music programming and creating events around particular sorts of well, I mean, in an academic context, it might be research or something in current events, but there might be lots of other ways in which different kinds of communities, worship communities, other communities might seek to find some common ground between musical performance and another sort of medium. It's so wonderful to hear about institutional buy-in for chaplaincy and music in chaplaincy. As someone who does both of those things, I know how much of a difference it can make. So I'm particularly curious about transferability of some of these ideas to some of the contexts in which people might find themselves: parish music, choral society, or community choir type contexts.
Yeah. So what my initial thought, the reason I mentioned the university community choir is that I'm thinking about the church I grew up in Horwich, which is near Bolton, and this is a story, I'm sure, a trope you've heard many times. But when I was a child, my brother, who was 6, was invited to join the church choir, but I wasn't allowed to because I was a girl, and I thought this was grossly unfair as an 8-year-old. And actually, they don't have any children at all now, so in fact, they barely have a choir. So they see, if they'd let me in, it would have all been fine. But I didn't understand, and I remember saying to my mum, I don't understand why this is the case. And more recently, the choir at that church is really not in a great position. And I've spoken to my mum a lot about what they could do to try and get more people into the choir. And I've suggested to my mum, that they should set up a community choir, because then it doesn't have to be a religious choir. It just a choir for the community. There are never going to be too many community choirs. And subsequently, somebody in Horwich did do that, and they've got a massive choir now. And if they, I thought it was a good idea I thought, why don't you try and offer the church as a venue for choirs to use for their rehearsals and try and get people in that way. But the other program related observation, for me, the pandemic really gave me an opportunity to do a few things I'd really wanted to do. One of them was to explore the carving and the windows in the chapel, which I knew were beautiful, but I could actually get into what they were. So we were able to explore what on the roof in the chapel are these hammer beams, which everyone said were angels, and there were all these funny myths about someone falling off, and actually they're not angels at all. They're the 10 virgins, and they're holding lamps, which are the lights, which I hadn't realised before. But I was able then to program music that related to the lights, which sounds a bit silly, but actually it made people engage with the building, which is one of my personal passions. Similarly, in the Butte Hall here, we have these beautiful secular stained glass windows. Some of them are sacred. We've got dots to the church, but we have all these Scottish literary figures. We've got windows dedicated to the women's, to women coming to Glasgow University, and these really quite detailed pictures. And so I think actually looking at these windows that have been created centuries ago, actually, it gives you an insight into that history of the building and the history of the people that were there. And that's something that I'm thinking about my church at home, that if I were to go back there now and was asked to program a concert, I think the windows for me would be, because people, they're put up as a memorial to someone, people move away, no one knows who they are. But a little bit of archival research, you can really bring them back to life. And if there's images, beautiful images in the windows, actually using those to then advertise a concert that includes music in them, you've already got your image, and it's all integrated. Those are just 2 off the top of my head examples. Here in Scotland, we're quite keen on doing we have quite a strong relationship with the Catholic chaplaincy, and we quite like looking at lots of the strange local saints that everyone's forgotten about as well, and trying to see if we can find any music for them, because there is a little bit of medieval Scottish music, like this much, but it's whether we can kind of find any of the dots. But we like doing that kind of archival research and talking to experts too. But I'm not sure if that's a helpful answer or not.
I think certainly encouraging people to find the thing that's special about their particular context and to make use of that in positive ways.
Oh, the other thing that I'm really interested in is bells, church bells. They often have mottos on them and they're fascinating. So I had an idea for a brilliant project, which would be to go around all these old churches with old bells, find the mottos and write an introit. And then if, like here, we used to have the bell ringing before services, you could actually write the piece in the right key and then the bell would go into the introit and you'd be singing words on the bell. I thought that was a brilliant idea. I've not done it yet, but I think if you've got a bell, write something with it.
And everybody knows how much in church contexts people are deeply invested in bells and buildings, even if they're not necessarily interested in music or religion. Sometimes those are ways of bringing people together. If you'll all forgive me, I have another question. But does anybody else have a question that they might like to ask at this point? I'll ask mine then. At a couple of points, you talked about the chapel choir and the chaplaincy being responsive to events and the mental health crisis and all sorts of other things. To what extent do you and your colleagues see the choir itself as a pastoral space in which people have these sorts of experiences and dialogue, and how do you do that?
So I think anyone who's working with students at all in any way, particularly as an adult in a kind of responsible position like that I am, you have to be aware of their mental health and their physical health, and it's always been our responsibility, but now since the pandemic, there's an awful lot of anxiety and stress around, so you have to just be super aware and not be not be difficult with them. You need to be understanding, and if certainly in my experience, if you are understanding of their, like, for example, students can be a little bit like last minute, just before you've got a massive concert, they suddenly realize they've got a deadline and they can't be there, or they feel they can't be there. And in the past, it might have been like, you'd be like, well, no, you have to be there, but you just can't do that now. You have to say to them, you explain why this is a difficult decision that they've decided to make, but you need to, like, I think, cut them a lot more slack than perhaps I was cut when I was a student. And I think that's one thing, but also that I'm not sure whether that was what you were getting at, because I certainly think we have a pastoral role for our members, but I also know that the chaplaincy use us in these vigils because people find the call music a nice opportunity. Can I word this? They find it helpful if they're trying to relax and they're trying to reflect. They find it takes them out of themselves. It gives them an opportunity to just kind of sit and be. So we do go and sing for the vigils, and people find Teze very meditative and reflective as well. So yes, I think the choir themselves have some responsibility to offer a kind of pastoral element, but we absolutely have a pastoral responsibility to our members too.
Thank you very much. Something that one of the chaplains mentioned about letting something happen to those who are there without expectation of buy-in is a huge advantage to these sorts of contexts and services and concerts.
Yeah, and I think we also have a huge advantage over lots of churches in that we don't have our income. We don't have to upkeep the building. A lot of the heavy responsibility that lies with churches and parish councils we don't have, because the university look after the building. So we're at a huge advantage, I think, and again, it's not something that I think it's important to recognise that we have a lot more time and flexibility. I'm not going to pretend we've got a lot of investment, because we don't have very much money, but we have my time and Kevin's time, which is almost full time. So it's a huge privilege.
As time draws on, have we any more questions for Katy on her talk, or anything that's emerged from proceedings? Well, in that case, thank you once again so much for coming to be with us this evening and for sharing that really rather beautiful film of everything that you do in your context. Hopefully it's been a nice experience for you to put that together. And thanks ever so much for coming to be with us this evening.
Well, still, thank you for having me.
And your weekly reminder of next week's seminar. Next week, Canon Vicky Johnson from York Minster, presenter there, will be talking about ecclesiology and voice and lots of other wonderful things she's been working on. She's currently acting chaplain at Merton College in Oxford, so we'll look forward to seeing her next week. But thank you all very much for being here, and thank you once again to Katy for her paper and her conversation.